You've been studying the human body since you were 5 years old. Yeah.
The mind always wants to be right, and it will always
Yes.
figure out some way to get there. So that bodies are energetic. I mean, we break the body down, it's nothing but energy. Looking at how a body can heal, a body needs to be able to, one, have energetic change, and two, it needs to have physical structural change. But I also saw that if you can change form and energy and structure, then thoughts tend to change.
Okay.
The bottom line was people started getting better on some things that didn't make sense to Western psychology. When that starts to happen, a lot of stuff that we never addressed mentally disappears. Old feelings of insecurity, of unworthiness, codependent behaviors. Sometimes we're changing the end of centuries of the same behaviors, the same traumas.
I think the only thing that we can actually say we are victim to is these automatic subconscious patterns that we get stuck in that we don't know we're in. That's the amazing thing about what you've done with your career is you've found the how, and there's so many other people out there that have a slice, and you've tied it all together. It's set. Well, hey, Don, thanks for coming on to the podcast today, the Top Human Podcast. Really excited to have you here. I've been seeing you for, I think, over a year at this point as my set therapist. But let me give you kind of an introduction here for whoever is listening to kind of get an idea for who you are. Some of this is from memory. A little bit of this is from your website. So if I remember right, you've been studying the human body since you were 5 years old. You have several sets of letters after your name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce them all or remember them all. You've been trained in both Western modalities and Eastern modalities for bodywork and psycho work. You've been trained in both the mental and the physical as far as healing modalities and therapies. And through all of that, you started structural energetic therapy 40 years ago, 50 years ago?
40 some.
Something like that, 40 something. It's been life-changing for me, for sure. And you've trained other therapists nationwide. And the way I see it, you're doing work that is very rare to find, that very few other people are doing. I'd like to hand it over to you for anything that I might have missed, any other details you'd like to add just about yourself.
Well, that's kind of what we're looking at, but we're also looking at my own personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the development of set and the exploration of set was me exploring who I was, clearing myself, and expanding and evolving in my own right. One of my real goals was to be able to work with people in a way that they could, for lack of a better term, heal or transform conditions in their life. The body was an approach to short circuit the incredible defense mechanisms that the mind has built up.
Yeah.
The mind always wants to be right, and it will always figure out some way to get there.
Yes.
And it will always second guess anything that we do. So in my training, I was also a licensed mental health counselor and a massage therapist. I had to get the massage license to be able to do the manual body work I'm doing. It's not massage by the classic term, it's more therapeutic body work.
Yes.
And what I saw in people's bodies, both through my study of Alexander Lowen and some of the Neo-Reichian work I did, was that bodies are energetic. I mean, we break the body down, it's nothing but energy. Now, this is going to be a roundabout way of getting back what structural energetic therapy is. It's kind of giving us a theoretical base. Energy, we know it responds to thought. We know it, smallest particle of energy is a photon. And we know that observing a photon, it can change. These are just huge, broad things that we know about it.
The double slit experiment proved that.
Right. Energy without thought has no matter, has no mass. If you take Erme, Qigong, ancient Chinese, we have Wuji and Taji. Wuji is energy with no mass, with unlimited potential. Taji is anything that has atomic mass to it. That's kind of a modern update using the atomic word there, but that's atomic creates matter.
Right.
So, but with that matter is thought. So with that, looking at how a body can heal, a body needs to be able to, one, have energetic change. It can't continue holding energy in the same manner and heal. And two, it needs to have physical structural change. We kind of understood that the structure of the body, when people are balanced and structurally in alignment, they are better. Everything operates at a higher level. That's kind of
Yes.
Newtonian physics in the sense that we look at the systems in the body and how they work. But what was thrown out of the window was the idea that energy plays a part.
Right.
Now,
not a lot of people talk about energy.
In bioenergetic therapy, we started taking a neo-Reichian therapy. We started looking about the emotions being energy, and the way the body handles emotions is the way it handles energy. So we saw people's bodies tightening up and distorting to contain emotions, which was
Right.
stopping energy flow within their body, or was causing energy when it flowed through the body to have to flow through tightened muscle mass. That actually turns out a beautiful word that Wilhelm Reich used was negative mental mass. That we would block off emotions because they had thoughts of them and they weren't okay. Now, taking
and they're
that,
uncomfortable.
yeah,
to
taking
feel.
that broad thing, we'll go ahead and take a look at somebody that has pain. Where did that pain come from? Well, structural misalignment can be observed.
Right.
So can energetic blockage and energetic flow. When you start to charge a body, bring more energy into a body, you can start to see what happens as it starts to flow. And one of the things that Wilhelm Reich was very good at was charging a body and finding out the spots that didn't flow. And he was the first one in Western medicine or Western philosophy that went ahead and tied that to mental health or to self-actualization.
Okay.
So in his processes that he was working with people, he would try to get them to build up a charge, find out where it's blocked, and then he would go ahead and attack, physically attack by pressing on it or creating motion or opening of that block so that the person would have an expression emotionally. And one thing he was very good at was if you didn't go ahead and express the vocal aspect of it, he would pinch and squeeze you till you would. So one of the jokes about his work was it was pinch and squeeze therapy. But the bottom line was people started getting better on some things that didn't make sense to Western psychology.
Sure.
And people started coming around for that. So what he really did was give me a background to see that energy flows in the body, a way to identify it, and a way to go ahead and release it, and see the value of releasing it in the healing process, or as the other way of looking at it, in the actualizing process, becoming all you can be. Because if all this is blocked off, you are limited. Now, we now get to the mind, and the mind, the thoughts help create this. And if you go after something psychologically, well, gee, we can explain what happened to you when you were 3 years old. And in 20 years of therapy of just analyzing it, without working on changing that aspect, you'll understand absolutely perfectly that your father didn't give you enough love at the age of 3 when you fell down, and that's why you feel what you feel.
Right.
But you're still feeling the same thing.
Right. You can have that logical understanding.
Is still blocked in the body.
But yeah, you have to embody the change.
So now we get to the thing of transformation.
Yeah.
A significant change in form or function. Well, or structure. Let me make sure I get structure there. Well,
do you see structure different from form?
Yes, because structure is a support within the body. How the body's supported. I see form as kind of amorphous around that structure.
Okay.
But I can see a lot of distortion of the body with a lot of different form, sometimes different degrees of muscle or muscle tone or what have you.
Okay.
But the structure still is not there in support, or it's there in supporting the blockage.
Yeah.
So I started looking at people that were coming to me in pain, and I wanted to create an environment that would allow them to heal. So train a deep tissue body. Fascia is what chronically tightens and stays and allows the body to maintain tightened structure or tightened blockages.
And that's different than a muscle knot.
Yeah. Fascia, simple explanation of fascia is it surrounds every muscle group,
right?
Every muscle, and goes between every muscle and through every muscle.
Yeah, the fascia is that stuff like if you're peeling apart like a chicken, it's all the thin,
all
clear,
that
sticky stuff.
But then it's also that clear skin, it looks like a blue skin or shiny skin over the muscle. And then if you go ahead and cut through the muscle, you'll see fibers of it running through between different fibers or through fibers. You'll even see it running along with nerves. So fascia
Yeah.
is a system that's been ignored by medicine, Western medicine.
Yeah.
As without that, they'd say without the muscles you'd fall apart. Well, without fascia, the muscles would fall apart. And they wouldn't have any form, or they wouldn't hold any structure.
Right.
So the fascia is really that one that really sits there. But with that, we also have the thoughts that help create it, create the structure and everything. So what I saw for healing, we had to have transformation of thought, form, and
Right.
energy.
Yeah.
So, but I also saw that if you can change form and energy and structure, then thoughts tend to change in spite of
Yes.
what the mind's doing.
Yes.
So that was like, okay, so I can work with people, and we need all those things to happen for healing to take place, for potential to expand, and for them to reach their potential or their peak experience or their evolutionary process, not being limited by these accumulated things from the past. So I started working that in and working with that. Now, I'm leaving out meditation right now. That was one of my journeys. Meditation helped me get my
Sure.
mind in a place
Same.
that would allow me to have space to allow things to happen. But for SET, I really wanted to give people an experience that would allow them to heal. And I didn't want to go around with classic psychotherapy, playing with all those thoughts and all those things that happen.
Because the cognitive understanding is not enough.
That negative emotion in the body that had been stored up. And we needed to release the structural patterns that basically accompanied that as the muscles tightened up to contain that emotion.
Right.
So we needed to
Right.
create a support system by working with that. And that brought us into another aspect of structure that I found in the body, and that was the cranium. There is a distortion
Yes.
in the cranium called the core distortion. I named it because what it was called before that was natural. This is natural for people.
Right.
And
Right.
it's the same pattern. It's a spiral twist that goes from the cranium and all the way down the body that will give approximately 22 to 28 degrees of distortion of the spine and between the sacrum, the ilium, and the spine. Now, that creates incredible things with the neck, that creates all the way down to the feet. I mean, this goes all the way through.
Sure.
And when I started working with fascia and structure, I'd start taking a look at where people's pain was, okay, and what's that pattern in that area, governed by fascia, governed by energy blocked, and work with that, and kept working with that. And we could get some of the emotion to release. We could get those things moving. We could start changing those patterns, but there still was not a structure that supported the body being healthy, supported the body being at its optimal.
Yeah.
And I was looking specifically at the relationship between the sacrum and the ilium. When you had one ilium that would rotate anterior, one posterior, then the base for the sacrum was tipped, and the sacrum had the tip. And so the base of the spine was tipped. So you had an exaggerated curvature all the way up the spine into the neck. And when it kept on.
And is that 28? That's that 28 degrees you were talking about?
Correct, which is considered normal.
Wow, really? Because that's a significant
Dr. Yoakum, who did all the X-ray radiographs for teaching chiropractors and osteopaths and orthopedic surgeons, basically says this, that it's 28 degrees at the age of 1. Okay, now.
At the age of 1, and I was gonna bring this up. I wanted to interrupt you for a minute. You've done the cranial work on babies.
Yes.
On newborn babies. So you can see this, if you're trained, of course, you can see this that early on in the development of the human body.
I can actually see it in babies that are 10-week test tube babies, 10 weeks old in test tubes or in jars.
Wow.
And it's like, my God, you can actually start to see the formation of these iliums. You can actually start to see the imbalance. Now, that brings us to a question I'm not going to go into today is, where does it come from? And it's like, just say it's, right now, let's just go, that's another whole hour and a half talk at least.
Sure.
But right now, what we can look at is it's there. It's considered normal. And yet every form of dysfunction in the structure related back to it.
Interesting.
No matter what injury you had, the weaknesses from that were greatly enhanced by the injury that you had. So I was looking at how to go ahead and bring people into a rehabilitation how to rehabilitate the structure so it had less of that going on. And that would help take the pressure off the area of damage, whether it was a low back, whether it was a shoulder, whether it was a knee, whether it was a foot, whether it was a neck from a whiplash, whatever. If we got it back in better balance, they would function better. What I was finding in all of chiropractic and all of physical therapy and all of orthopedic surgery, it was called a hip complex. And there was no answer. There was no answer to lessening that degree of distortion. Well, and it was natural, right? I mean, everybody had it. But nobody was looking at this distortion aspect of the cranium and how the cranial bones came together and how that motion was, the cranial motion was distorted exactly the same way the rest of the body was distorted. So working with an osteopath, a chiropractor, and some other cranial people, started bringing up the idea of what if we started changing this movement of the cranial bones and brought them into alignment? What would happen?
Because they do move.
Huge move, but it's also a very subtle move.
Yes.
And
I think a lot of this work is very subtle.
Yes.
Right.
Basically, what it had come down to was the same patterns repeated throughout the body, and we were ignoring it. Now, what governs the movement of bones? Again, we're coming back to fascia and connective tissue.
The soft tissue.
Correct. Now, the cranial work that was out there was all using 5 grams of pressure. And they were all going off this thing that they could damage people if they put more pressure to it.
Interesting.
Yet I ran into 1 or 2 old osteopaths and said, "Oh, I don't pay attention to that 5 grams of pressure. These are solid bony prominences. They're not going to break with up to 5 pounds of pressure." I mean, obviously they're pretty hard. I mean, bump heads with somebody someday. But what I started applying was I started applying soft tissue, what I knew about fascia, of slow, steady pressure, holding it to unwind that torsion.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, when the torsion came out of the cranium, it came out of the sacrum ilium. It came out of this whole core distortion all the way down to the feet, all the way to the top of the head.
Wow.
And we'd never seen it before. It's like, wait a minute, what just happened? And that can all be changed by working with the cranium. But with pressures that cranial work hadn't worked with up to that point. So what that
because
gave
of the
us
5
was,
grams limitation.
the 5 gram limitation was huge, but also why change what's normal? So basically,
there's not a lot of people trying to push those boundaries. You know, when you're taught something's normal, you just learn to work within it. But
and there's
then
no
you
reason
don't
to look
innovate.
beyond.
Right.
Why look beyond? Well, I was looking at people in pain, and this was what it all came back down to. If we could shift that, and that spine that was supported, the curvatures of the spine and the distortion of the body would come out, and that was where the pain resided, was in those distortions. Certain areas would collapse more than others due to the injuries or usage or whatever, or to the emotional blockage. So when this happened, all of a sudden we had a structure to rehabilitate to. So the body
had like a goal, right, for the body.
Right.
To get the goal.
The body would recognize the structure and it would try to let go as much as it could. And it would, but it was like we actually had a weight-bearing support structure to go to. Now, it would try to go back into alignment, but some of the connective tissue throughout the body could only change so much because of scar tissue, adhesion, and the emotional holding patterns. Now, I'll tie this to 2 places right now. One, I'll tie it to someone with scoliosis, which is an exaggerated curvature of the spine, which is also based from the core distortion. Once we got the muscles engaged that couldn't engage before, they would help maintain the structure. So I was getting changes in scoliosis that medical science said you couldn't get. And we were able to go ahead and change the structure so things like disc degeneration or even herniation could heal. And you didn't have to go to surgery. You could heal from your body. You'd have to give it time to heal. But as long as you stayed within the structure, it would heal. The body's amazing. It wants to heal. The other thing, okay, so now we have the person with the injury. Now let's take a look at the person that wants to be an athlete or wants to get the most out of their body through their life. Okay, now they have a structure. Now they have more strength, more coordination, and they have less susceptibility to injury. So they're going to lead their life with fewer injuries because the weaknesses that were there are no longer there. Structural balance prevents that. But this is where it gets so interesting because now some of this emotional energy that's been dormant, been locked
Mhm.
up, now starts to move because the
Yeah.
channels are more open. And some of the tight fascia that was blocking off the different expressions of emotions in different parts of the body starts to open up to allow more energy to come through. So we can see all these amazing things happen in the body. And at this point, when that starts to happen, a lot of stuff that we never address mentally disappears. Old
Right.
feelings of insecurity, of unworthiness, codependent behaviors just start to no longer make sense. People's diets change, and people tend to start
It's like we
looking more,
never had them
yeah,
sometimes.
people start looking
Yeah.
more inner and paying attention to the messages coming from their body. And so now they're living
Right,
their
which
life,
we lose.
yeah, and now they start living the life at a different level. And that's
Totally.
really neat. And that's
Yeah.
another part of the transformation that takes place.
Yeah.
And like I wanted it, right? So I definitely had it done to me. I've had over 200 sessions myself because it's like I want to continue also doing the work I'm doing. And bending over a table is a bad
Right.
structural thing. So
Of
keeping my own
course.
body in its best posture made total sense. But also helping other people rehabilitate makes total sense. So
Yes.
things we could never address by coming into this part, we could actually get long-term change for. And the
Yeah.
very sad part is that more people don't do it. I came out and started talking to people about it. It's like, oh yeah, no, you're just talking about something more. God meant you to be that way. That's the way you were made. Well, my
Yeah.
answer to that was God also meant it to be corrected because he gave us the information, or she, or it, or whatever you want to call God. But the
Yeah.
information's here on the planet now. It wasn't on the planet until
Yeah.
40 years ago. And when I got that, my body work potential of healing and working with people, I don't heal them, but I help them set the conditions for them to heal,
Right.
just expanded dramatically.
Wow.
And okay, now I really have something totally different. The other thing that was amazing was we didn't have people walking around on the planet that had the core distortion taken out. Everybody I saw,
Because it was normal.
was normal. Now they're abnormal.
Right.
They're abnormal, but they're better than normal.
Happy normal.
So that's
Right.
one
They're
of my jokes.
more more actualized, I think was what you said,
Correct.
right? Actualized, optimized.
So they
Yeah.
have the potential to
Healed.
actualize even further and move further.
Mhm.
So the body's collapse was actually holding people back. If we look at the
Yes.
chakras, the 7 energy centers that come through, all those 7 areas were affected by the core distortion, and they opened up.
Sure.
But the biggest one I see is the connection of the heart, is that block between the heart and the lower chakras. When that opens
Interesting.
up, it allows people to be more connected to their heart, where survival, creativity, and sex, power become connected to the heart, where they're not weapons used against people, but they're used to connect and work with people. So
Right.
it literally, you take a look at this and you can see the potential for people to evolve into a higher level of consciousness
Yeah.
that tends to show up
Yeah.
for people, in spite of people coming in saying, I don't want any of that stuff. I just want to get a pee.
I just want, right. I'm sure that's
Don't
one
do
of the
that
things
psychological
that they
stuff.
come for.
But when they start to release that stuff, now suddenly they start to feel the relief from within and find out that certain emotions and feelings and all aren't the terrible things they thought they were, but now they're free to express, and they actually start to heal, and they heal relationships where they're holding on to things, or they go ahead
Yeah.
and are able to relate to their children or to their own inner child.
Which is really important because a lot of us
Very
don't
important.
really do that internal work and take a look inside.
So they're in contact with it. They can feel it, and it's okay. So it's the door is opened.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just
Once you
joy.
kind of, I don't want to say you bait and switch them, right? But they kind of come to you. And I was going to ask you this too. The main thing that your clients approach you for is probably physical pain. Right?
Most
Yeah.
often. But I do have some clients that have heard of the energetic work. The emotional work will come for that too.
Yeah.
And
That was me, if I
clients,
remember right.
and I'll also have clients coming to me for athletic prowess.
Okay.
I've got a number of younger soccer players and football players that are coming to me to try to get the most out of their bodies and also avoid injuries. So
Right.
it's like
So they're more
there's so many
preventative, which is good.
benefits there's no just one place that people come, but it's like
Right.
very few people are aware of all the potential that can happen, or
Yeah.
how it's going to expand the journey.
And that's the amazing part to me is, and what I tried to get across in your introduction is how you studied the full spectrum of all of the healing modalities. And I don't want to say you've boiled it down to something simple, but in a way you have. And it's not easy, right, to do the work, but it's simple, right? It's this core distortion, the trapped energy, the tight muscles, the structure side. And as you start to release that, then all of these transformations happen, physical, mental, and spiritual.
Correct.
And that to me is, and there's similarities, right, with those benefits and all of the other forms, all the other modalities that you can do, whether it's physical therapy, whether it's psychotherapy, whether it's trauma therapy like EMDR, right? Just like, real quick side note, when you said, as the person reaches the higher level of consciousness and actualization as they do the work, they forget about, and the mind changes and doesn't remember those, ways of thinking, the old ways of thinking, right? Correct. The fears, the doubts. They see that in animals too, right? Like they've done studies with like trauma therapy, EMDR, stuff like that on like mice that get threatened by some sort of threat. It'll shake out its energy, and then they've scanned the brain. They realize the mouse doesn't even remember that there was a threat 10 seconds ago, which is crazy. And in us humans, we just keep these threats, bubbling up in our minds.
And then we keep on putting it out there to view the world through that threat.
Yeah, we project it.
A threatening place.
Yeah, and then we're living in kind of fight or flight mode all the time, and that's the normal that we're all swimming in.
And then take a look at your nervous system. Everything's all whacked. There's no balance, there's no calmness, there's no inner peace evolves out of that.
Yeah.
It's always trying to avoid the next jolt. And what do we do?
Always stimulated.
We try to get more in control. We tighten up even more. And we just
it's a self-downward spiral.
It doesn't go anyplace.
Yeah.
But the more I study, the more I take a look at all the various places it comes together, the more it makes sense.
Yes.
And I see some cultures have had parts of it, but they haven't put the whole thing together.
Yeah.
And it's just like mind-boggling to me that it came to me that I was one of the people that put this together, brought structural energetic therapy out for its way it works. And I get to see it happen. I've trained over 500 people around the country, some outside of the country. And I'm now giving it to them to go ahead and take it out further.
Yeah, nice.
But I've had some experiences in my life that have let me see that people are coming to me because they're the ones who are supposed to be here.
Because there's a reason. Yeah.
There's a reason. And I don't have to know it, but they're the ones that are supposed to be here. And I more sit back and look at that now. Like, oh, look at this person. Where this person has a really interesting journey. That person has an interesting journey. That one has an interesting journey.
I remember you told me that when
something too.
When I found you in our first meeting, I remember you said that. And it's crazy because I had my eyes, and so we're in Tampa, right? You're up in Lutz, about 15 minutes north of Tampa, in Florida. And I had my eyes on Tampa 5 years ago. And then I moved to Puerto Rico to stop traveling, with one of the reasons being to heal my mind and my body. And I ended up there. And after 3 years of being in Puerto Rico, I realized this isn't where I was going to do the work. This isn't where it was, it just wasn't happening down there for me. And so I decided to leave, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to where the top of my list was, which was Tampa, Florida. So I came here, bought a house and everything. And shortly after, I found you, and you're 15 minutes away. It was just a perfect, kind of alignment, serendipity of just finding who I needed. Because I've seen many massage therapists, psychotherapists, acupuncturists, chiropractors, and they don't do the work you do. And it's definitely not as effective. from what I've seen. There's work that you do as part of SET, a lot of the cranial stuff that is just not found in other modalities, at least in the majority of the other types of therapists you're going to find, or body workers.
I think you're right. I mean, some people got the message when I spoke. Some people decided to at least learn the core distortion release, and what I call cranial structural therapy, because it's directly related to the structure. I had to kind of pull it out and get it out there because everybody wasn't going to come and take the full SET training. I realized that.
For your students.
It was too valuable not to have out there. It just is too valuable.
But you're still taking students, right? So you're still taking students.
We're still taking
students. You have a training center. Yeah. So if anyone's listening to this that has license to touch, right, then they can still take your programs.
Yes. Yeah, we're still have people training and doing it. I'm just now looking at it from a supervisory position of making sure the integrity of the work stays together and that I can promote the overall body of it and keep it valid. So I'm still learning though. That's the amazing thing. It's like I'm still learning. So I'll probably come back and do some special courses for people that have already taken it, some form of advanced work with it that I'm learning. It's like it never stops. It's like this whole process.
There's always more to learn.
Is to expand and grow. And to be able to pass it on is like really neat.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I would love to see your work grow and your students too, right? And just have more students. Because if someone's not seeing a SET therapist, if they're not seeing you, if they're not seeing one of your students, who are they seeing instead? Chiropractors, physical therapists?
They may even be seeing somebody that does myofascial work, but doesn't do it from this standpoint, doesn't do it with the structural skill that we have with SET.
Yeah.
Or some people will go see, now, right now, breath work is becoming very popular.
But it misses the physical component.
Yeah, and that does something, but I'm not seeing people working it to clear people. I'm seeing people working it to get more energy into their body, have more energy to do things, trying to get more power, but I don't see them using it to transform themselves. They're not. I see
it for that mental healing aspect. That's how I hear about it, at least. Yeah, but it definitely misses that physical component, and it's
right. They're not pushing.
I think people see it somewhat as like a quick fix too. You know, I don't know if that solves. Yeah, I don't know if it solves like the core, the root cause, unless it's done several times. You know.
Well, the bottom line is we all are able to contract and block emotion, and we've all been raised in cultures that we're rewarded for doing that. In fact, our survival is oftentimes based on the ability to do that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Definitely socially, I would say.
Yeah.
Right. In human society.
So what I see is it's like, and the way I've used it in my life is one to break open some really traumatic things from early childhood and release those.
The physical, the body work or breath work.
Both.
Yep.
But also to go ahead and continue. I mean, life still happens. You still have things happen.
Yeah.
Whether they fall into that formwork that they wrote in that book, Passages, that every 7 years you have a different passage, or whether it's just events. I mean, your parents died, relationships come and go, all these things happen. And each one brings something different out of you and leaves you with something different to deal with. And if you can go ahead and move more clearly and more fully to release those things, the potential negatives of those, then you process through and you expand much quicker. Yeah. And you lead your life operates at a much higher level than if you're getting down into the pain and getting stuck in the pain or getting stuck in the anger or getting stuck in all these things.
Yeah.
I've actually had some inspirations. There was a 88-year-old woman that came down to Florida for me to work with. She's in really severe pain. And she was going blind, she was going deaf, and she had a tumor the size of a grapefruit in her hip that the doctors wouldn't operate on because it was a fibroid tumor. And they said it would kill her, the surgery would kill her. They had her on some extremely heavy-duty pain pills, and she was just in excruciating pain, crying most of the time. Well, I worked for the fibroid tumors will shrink if you keep spreading the fibers and take the fascia as it connects in and stretching it.
Interesting.
So it shrunk down to about the size of a golf ball, but it wouldn't shrink any
Wow.
smaller.
That's like
And
25% of the original size, more or
Mhm.
less.
And she would get up to a week and a half of pain-free time before it would come back and would start to tighten up and build up. She'd just been told that she was going to lose the last of her sight,
Wow.
like the week before. And I picked her up, and out came this beaming 88-year-old woman. And I said, "Well, you look amazing today." She says, "I feel amazing." And I said, "Wow, that's great." She said, "Let me tell you what happened." I said, "What?" She says, "I woke up today and there's nothing about myself I would change. And there's nothing about myself I can't accept and love."
Wow.
And I said, "Wow, well, I got it." It's like you wanted to arrive at where she'd finally arrived in this lifetime of being that okay with who you are and what your life had been about, that you
Yeah.
could just be enjoy about it,
That
rather than bitter
self-actualization.
and scared
Really.
and all these other things that people are.
Yeah.
And it's like, she got me. So it gave me a
How long
goal.
were you working on her?
I worked on her for about 8 months. And then
Okay.
her heart basically was giving out all the way. So her daughter brought her back to Cleveland, where she came from. And she died
Okay.
about 2 weeks after she went back up there.
Oh,
So her
wow.
daughter didn't want her to die without her daughter being present. So,
Yeah.
and they had a very good relationship.
But
But I
sounds
was
like
just,
you transformed the last months of her
yeah,
life.
yeah. And she gave me some beautiful things to look at for life process.
Yeah.
Before I'd been looking at, okay, get rid of stuff and all that, but I'd never really seen it to the point of being in that so okay place that she was in that. And
Because
when I
that's,
saw it,
for
it's
lack of
like,
a better word, that's like the destination a lot of
mhm,
people want to arrive, right? Is
right,
this happiness, this inner peace,
right.
right?
And it
But
wasn't like
they
the
don't really.
circumstances of her life dictated it, because the circumstances of her life sucked. Going blind, losing her hearing, and her heart failing.
Sure.
But you're not your circumstances. You can
No,
be
we're
much
not.
bigger than your circumstances. And she showed how much bigger you can be.
And it
And
shows the difference between the mental and the physical.
mhm,
Just because you're blind or whatever it may be doesn't mean you have to have a negative psyche.
right. But I mean, if she could do that, the least I could do is keep working towards it. I still look at that. It's like when we don't go ahead and go down the same pathway as our genetic families have done, of tightening up and getting bitter and compressed and having less potential and being more
Mhm.
distorted. When we change that
You break that
for
chain.
ourselves, and sometimes we're changing the end of centuries of the same behaviors,
Right.
the same traumas,
Yeah. Because it's
and
all
it can
passed down generationally, right? You kind
generationally,
of
and it can stop.
absorb
It
from
can
your
stop right
parents.
here.
Yeah.
It can stop right here with us. That's
Yeah.
another great opportunity. And so many people
Huge.
totally miss that concept, that they
Yeah.
can literally, okay, they're, oh, poor me, this happened to me. But like, okay, it's also my opportunity to stop the chain.
Yeah.
The abuse can stop here. The negativity, the lack of inner child support can stop here. The not being good enough can stop here. I mean, it can literally stop here.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
that's such an opportunity we have in life. That's one of the things I see people opening up into more and more as they get the structural balance and the emotional clearing that takes place.
Yeah.
You said is it's stopping. You can see generationally it's stopping. And
Yeah.
you
And
see them treating their children differently. And
I would
that's a
like to
beautiful
think
path.
that's the best part, right? Because that's how you've broken the chain, and now your kids and the next
Mhm.
generation will grow up without that, pattern that
Yeah.
came down for decades.
Which brings
And
me to
then,
my case. I don't have any children.
mhm.
My children are all the children that are brought to me. Like you started to mention earlier, children. That when I work
Yeah.
with them very early on, and I can give a couple examples. One was a child that had a severe torticollis, osteopath child,
Okay.
that at 3 weeks they already had a 6 month surgery because the head would only go to one side. It wouldn't come back past the midline.
And this was the child of you said an osteopath, which is a
Right.
bodyworker.
And the father was just beside himself. It was their first child.
Wow.
And they brought this child to me. I'd never worked with an infant before. But in one session, that was totally changed, total restoration of range of motion.
Wow.
I mean, everybody in the room was crying that day. It was just, I just had no idea. And it's like, I was just overwhelmed. The parents were crying. The baby wasn't crying, but all the adults were crying. I have seen that child. She's now 32 years old, and she's now backpacking in Europe for boyfriend.
Wow.
And it's like, that's great. But it's like, I had that moment that totally changed, saw that change in that child's life that opened up a whole different life for it.
And what made them, I guess, find you or call you when the dad was an osteopath?
Another
and
massage
they already
therapist,
tried that surgery.
Another massage therapist was giving them massages, was doing the massage for father and
For the
mother.
babies or for the parents? Okay.
And the father came in totally distraught and told her about this. Now, that massage therapist had a bad neck, and she'd come to me for me to work for neck.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd gotten it corrected. She said, I don't know what he does, but I'm sure he could do something. So the father called me. Well, obviously, I was supposed to do that because I've constantly worked on thousands of children at this point. And it's just amazing. Another one is the birth trauma. People talk about birth trauma. Some people make it the biggest event of life and all this, but it is a trauma.
And yeah, just the natural process of being born is a trauma on the baby.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the separation from the mother and the way, unfortunately, they don't treat newborn babies very well. Pull them away from their mother, hold them upside down, slap them on the back, cut their life support system. And then if you're a male, they cut the tip of your penis off. Welcome to this world.
Lovely.
Now,
what an entrance.
Don't you enjoy this little entry? Okay.
Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up. This, or better yet, from the child standpoint, I didn't sign up for this shit. Get me out of here.
Right.
But I had a child that I was there at the birth, and it was a water birth, which was a much gentler birth transition.
Yeah.
But the child was still very fussy the next day. And for 2 or 3 days, just fussing and fussing, and the mother couldn't understand what was wrong. So I was able to take that child, put it over my heart in the hot tub again, and match my breathing to the child's, and then breathe with the child and slowly expand it. And the child went through a breath, went through a whole great big thing, a big upset, and then calmed down.
And then calm down.
And then all that fussiness was gone.
And that was that release, right?
That was that release of that child's birth trauma.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have a chance to have any other traumas.
Yeah.
So it's like that child was
clean slate
when I did that. So this is the sort of things that potentially we can take a look at how we can relate to one another different. And how, you know, there is a chance for children to be raised and expand and grow at a much different rate than what happened now. I mean, people talk about the millennials being so different, but I seriously think that the human race, people as a general whole, are trying to evolve to a higher level.
We're getting there.
Some people get stuck in some very shallow places.
And it is a stuckness too, right? Like, I've done a lot of personal growth over the years, and one thing that comes up very often is to not play the victim, right? Don't play the victim card of, oh, it's that person's fault. It's my boss that, you know, is putting me in this circumstance. It's my parents. Because like you said earlier, when you understand the psychology of your family logically, you're like, yeah, oh, it's because my parents that I'm this way, right? Well, you don't want to play the victim that it's their fault, right? That there's nothing I can do about it because they made me this way.
It makes you right and sticks you more with the problem.
Right. But what I will say is, I think the only thing that we can actually say we are victim to is these automatic subconscious patterns that we get stuck in that we don't know where. And it takes a lot of, what's the right word? It takes the right mindset to decide that, hey, I see there's something I can't control here. Let me start doing the work to break it down.
Correct.
And I would love to see that more in the population, in people, right? Is choosing to do the work.
It means you have to be accountable and take responsibility for it. Because the
Right.
only one you can change, you can't change anybody outside yourself.
You're the
The
only
only
one.
one you have any real power to change is this one,
Is yourself.
yourself.
It can be challenging if we don't know how. And
It
that's what
is.
I think, that's the amazing thing to me about with what you've done with your career is you've found the how that works on all these different levels. And there's so many other people out there that have a slice of it.
Mhm.
And you've tied it all together with Seth.
I've been very fortunate. I've found it, but also the experiences for me to find have shown up at the time I'm actually able to listen to it and hear it or observe it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it's all beyond me. It's like, it's just, okay, this is my destiny. It's like, I'm going to go kicking and screaming all the way to paradise, but I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
And I say that jokingly because I did a lot of kicking and screaming at times to get the anger out and stuff, but it's like,
Sure.
it worked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other side is a whole different place, a whole different way, where I'm not automatically reacting from those old programs and the old emotional energy that's stored. There's a
Yes.
moment I can have a choice.
Yes.
And I can take responsibility that that's
It's more
me.
calm.
That's me. That's nobody else. I
Yeah.
can be upset at them, but
Yeah.
it's really me in relationship to them. That's what I have control over.
And that's what I try to get people to, at least what I want to start helping people work towards, right?
Mhm.
Is removing the aspects, removing the things that are making us not us. If we remove the stuck energy, if we remove the negative thought patterns that we're stuck in, the
Mhm.
more of these things that we remove, the closer we become to our true, authentic, intuitive selves.
Right. And the more expansion we can have for
Yes.
going out.
Yeah. Because that stuck
And
energy will contract us without us even contracting.
right.
It does it for us.
And who we are gets smaller and smaller rather than larger and larger. It's
Yeah.
like we're playing a game, like I call it the Chinese box game, but we're playing it from the inside out. We're in this little box. And when we get through the walls and barriers of this box, we have a different box. When we get through
Yeah.
those, we get another one. Another one. But if we quit working, we create another small box, a smaller box. So we have the choice of whether we want to keep expanding.
That's a really good vision. Like the Russian dolls that are like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's like, are you going down to smaller? Or are you going, yeah,
And
are you making bigger and bigger?
that's
ones?
what that woman taught me, was like, we can go for that bigger box no matter what those circumstances.
Yeah. No,
And
definitely.
that was a beautiful lesson for me. And it was like, it really helped me see a way to go ahead and focus the rest of my life on growing and expanding and whatever. Now,
Yeah.
I mentioned the book Passages. I still think it's one of the most landmark and important books ever written for our culture. One of the passages
That's
I think is very interesting is there's a spiritual awakening in the early 60s, about the time that people start looking at they're not going to accomplish everything that they thought they were going to accomplish from their 50s or their 40s. They had these huge goals, but now they have to let go and realize what their life was. And that also prepares them to connect spiritually. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily religion. It means into the heart, into the love, into the connection of energy, which is a different thing than what I find in most religions. But
is that why they say life begins at 60?
Some people say that, and they're talking about, well, now you can be retired and stuff like this. Life doesn't begin because you retire.
Yeah.
You can get out of a pattern if you're in a negative pattern to a job, but most people lose purpose and they start to deteriorate very rapidly rather than keep expanding.
Because they're so attached to that. As
long as you have something to give, you need to give.
Yeah.
Then in giving, you receive, kind of.
Yeah.
And for me, I know that works incredibly well.
Definitely. And so one thing that's can be tricky to explain to people or to describe is a lot of this work, both the physical side and the mental side, especially on the energy side, at the energy level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is if you try to describe it to somebody, they're going to say, yeah, and it sounds like you've experienced this, right? It's like, yeah, don't give me any of the psychological stuff, just heal my pain. right?
Hmm.
It's like, well, you don't understand. You don't, maybe don't tell them straight up that you don't understand, but it's like, well, it's all connected, right?
Right.
How do you kind of, how can we kind of break the mysticism aspect of it? Do people have to like just have a leap of faith for like a first session? Or is there a
No.
way of explaining it with some analogy that maybe it just clicks for more people a little quicker? How do we kind of get people over that edge so that they see, you know what, this actually is worth doing as part of my personal development?
Okay. What I do is I focus in on why they came.
Mhm.
Okay. I want to get rid of pain. Okay. Now, that's going to be structure. I can explain and show them the core distortion and how we can work with that.
Right.
And I can say, and now, even though I do the core distortion, if I press here, it still hurts. Does yeah, it really does. Okay, try breathing into that. Oh, that's a little different if I breathe. Okay, but that's part of what we're looking. We're looking to encourage you to let something happen.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, but I don't want any of that psychological shit. Well, breathing is not too threatening, is it? You've been doing it all your life. In fact, I think not breathing is more threatening than breathing.
Right.
Oh, well, maybe you're right. And then I show them how the fight or flight mechanism happens in the tissue. When they don't breathe, the tissue doesn't expand. So
Mm.
now I'm
And they
working
can
them
feel
around to
that.
the concept of breathing and being alive might be a neat thing to do, especially while I'm poking them, working on the
Might be.
body. And the pain's less when they breathe. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, we're opening and discourse into where the pain came from, what the pain's about, and what the
Yeah.
components are, and how it releases. And they will start to bring themselves out instead of hiding
Sure.
behind this massive tightened
Right.
body
Because we
armor.
all have that wall. We all have this
Yeah.
layer that
But
protects us.
I try to create a safe enough space as they start to change it. They start to bring themselves forward more. And as they come
Yeah.
forward, I can put a few more ideas out there in a way that aren't so threatening. Well, you made a sound there and it felt better. Yeah, well, that was actually an emotional release. You see, it wasn't so threatening. And now
Mhm.
look, if I press in there, it doesn't hurt as much, does it? No. Okay.
Wow.
Yay. Later on, then I'll sometimes like I'll have a brochure on emotional release or something, and I'll pick up, what's this emotional release stuff? I said, well, take it
Yeah.
and read it and ask me some questions when you come back.
Right.
Well, I don't think I really need that. Do you? Well, are you in pain? Do you want to get rid of your pain? Well, yeah, that's why I came here. Well, that would help.
Yeah. Like, yeah,
It's up
so
to you
what
whether
we
you want
just
to use it
did.
or not. What do you mean? I'm not going to get everything I could get here if I don't know. You can get more out of your session if you're willing to go there, but you won't
Right.
go there till you're ready.
Right.
I'm not going to force you to go there because I don't want to
And you
drive you out
can't.
of the room. I
Yeah.
want to make it safe enough for you. Now, there's another concept here that plays in,
Mhm.
and Alexander Lowen talked about it a lot, called grounding. And that's an energetic flow that flows through the body into the feet and back up. And most people, that's blocked off by the same tight muscles that block off the emotional energy. And as that you start to get the core distortion opened up, so you're supported, and these muscles that were chronically contracted let go, more energy flows down. So you feel more connected. And you feel less like that abandoned child because you're feeling stronger, but you're not
Right.
tightening up to be strong. It's just a sense of being more supported inside your body, which makes it safer to start to look at things that may have been overwhelming before. It's now, well, I can look at that now because I'm feeling different. And that takes place at an unconscious level, subtle unconscious level. But as they get more grounded, they feel stronger and more enabled to go ahead and change
Mhm.
and take some
Yeah.
risk that before they would never in a million years have taken a look at.
Yeah. Because you're no longer in that fight or flight. I must survive. I can step out
Correct.
and try something new. I can take a risk.
Mm-hmm.
I can put
And I'm
myself
feeling
out there.
strong, feeling connected. So
Yeah.
that doesn't seem as risky as having somebody cut the
Right.
tether to my balloon and I float away.
And that's like your confidence, right? And this happens, at
Yeah.
least in men, if you're trying to talk to women, there's this idea, this word, confidence, that comes up all the time. And like no one really knows what it means in a great, like really succinct definition, but it's hard to put words to this because it's a feeling. But I
Well,
think what you just described is exactly it, is if you can remove the things that are making you kind of unconfident, I guess, right?
Right.
Unsafe, fight or flighty, then as you remove those, you enter this state where you don't care about what other people think. You don't care about, oh, I used to think this thing was a risk, but it's actually not a risk because
Correct.
I am strong. I am grounded. I
Right.
am me.
And somebody doesn't like me, that's fine.
Hmm.
If somebody likes me, that's fine. Because I
Yeah.
like me.
Right.
And I know I'm connected and I'm solid.
Yeah.
You used the word confident. Grounded gives you that sense of, I don't say confidence, it's like, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And it's like, I don't necessarily, confidence could be used there, but it's like okayness is what I would go to more than
Yes.
confidence. I'm okay.
No
I'm
matter
connected.
what happens.
No matter what happens, I'm still
Yeah. I
lovable. I'm
like
still
that.
solid. I'm still going to be okay in this. And it's like, interesting thing is they take a look at grounding and they take a look at victims. And people that have been victims, when they ground, they no longer are victims.
Mm.
If they can ground, they're not going to be a victim because they're not at effect of everything. They're now solid.
Yeah.
Uh,
A little bit
some
less
examples
agitation, I
I can
guess,
use
right?
about people
You
that
don't
finally get
react.
grounded. It's like, okay, yeah, they can walk in and it doesn't have to turn out a certain way. They're going to be okay
Yeah.
no matter how it turns
Less
out. So they can just be
expectations.
themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, approaching a woman, it's like she'll like me or she won't, but she'll at least know who I am.
Right.
You know, approaching any group of people. My boss will give me a raise or he won't, but it doesn't mean anything. He'll either give me a
Right.
raise or he won't. But I'm grounded. I'm okay the way I am.
Yeah.
But the concept was so good. That was the biggest concept that I took out of the bioenergetic training I had was groundedness. When you become grounded, now you're different. Now you're different in the world. Your body's different. And the core distortion helped you get there faster than anything I know. As we
Yeah.
take the
No,
core distortion out, we open up and provide a structure that allows that grounding to take place
yeah.
and
Yeah.
energy flow to take place. It's wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing. And I mean, I've been seeing you for about a year now, and I'm finally getting to that point. And my body's blown my mind what the state my body has been in and the state it was in before I met you. And even just last week, I'm getting to the point where it's like I'm feeling that normal, which what should be normal, right? That
Mhm.
groundedness that you're talking about. It's finally coming around. I think I'm probably an edge case as far as the amount of work that I've needed. And that blows my mind. And that's kind of my next question too, is one of the things that has fascinated me since, working with you is how distorted, how much energy can get stuck in the body. And right, because I've been doing this self energy work at some degree for years.
Mhm.
And there's been several points where I'm like, oh wow, like that was a really good session. Or I feel like I made a lot of progress. I'm getting close. Like I'm almost there. And then I meet you, and then it's like, nope, there's a lot more to go. Right. And then we've had
Mhm.
several sessions where I'm releasing a lot of energy on your table. And after each one, I'm like, man, that was a great session. Like I must be getting there, And
Well,
so it is just unimaginable is the word I've started to use. It is to any person who's doing the work, it is your own work, right? It's unimaginable
right.
how much energy you have trapped inside.
I agree. And sometimes it's a lifelong journey. It's like, but
Yeah.
the more you ground, the more you're able to move it, the less you need somebody else to do it for you. The more you continue through your life just naturally doing the work. We're on this planet for a purpose, and clearing out whatever we have, it's part of our purpose is going to be what it's going to be. But what else are you going to do while you're here, really? It's like
Right?
it gets boring just making a living and money. I mean,
They're
let's
gonna
look at
drink and
this.
watch TV and watch sports
Yeah,
and
I mean,
play and
yeah, but it's like, what sense of change is there, of growth, of becoming?
not
It's
yeah,
like
it's not a lot.
not a lot. Sometimes I want to do those things just to take my mind off the intensity or out of the intensity. but I don't want to let this go.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about is meditation, and that could be another whole
Right.
talk. But
That could be a whole other podcast.
a whole other podcast. We haven't talked about some other things that are there, some of the quantum connections that can be made and all that. I've met people that go out and do a whole lot of Kundalini yoga before they have any of this opening in their body, till they literally almost crack and have a mental breakdown type of thing. And a year or two later, they finally come out of it. It's like, well, was that really a good way to go with it? Or couldn't we have done something a little gentler to the system that you could have moved along with it and still been on the process of getting there?
Yeah, that's a great point too, because people these days are doing things. Breathwork isn't the best example, but like psychedelics are starting to be a thing. And so in general, people want like a silver bullet, right? They want a quick fix. And people might try and find something like that that is more, in their minds, instant. Set is something that's a bit more gradual, right? Doing this work yourself, meditation, stuff like that is a bit more gradual. How would you kind of balance those? Because you're not going to get all of the stuck energy out, all of the physical, structural stuff for sure out by something like psychedelics. But people don't like the slow and steady wins the race idea of something like set.
Well, you have to realize psychedelics can be used in a lot of different ways. One was recreation, which was okay. I guess you got the last lot, whatever. But there's another one. It can be a spiritual opening.
Totally, and that's what I meant. Sorry, that's what I meant for the usage.
You start to see things differently, but then you don't go take psychedelics every day to try to get there.
Right.
Now you see what you can be with, you do some work. So now how can I work in this life to support that place of whatever it may be? Say, I'll pick one that's been common for me, is connection to the universal energy in a way that's undeniable.
Yeah.
It's
you feel it.
Feel it, experience it. It's like this, there's no doubt this is real. This is a reality.
Yeah.
A place. Okay, so now I come back to my meditation. And now I want to get there through my meditation. I want to be able to contact that same sense, that same connection energetically. Now I come back to my breath work I'm doing. And on that breath work, when I have that time where I can go someplace, when I can open up to someplace, I want to allow that energy to connect universally because I know it's out there to be connected to.
Yeah.
And now when I see the way the universe works or see things, I can see it. Well, it's part of all working together perfectly, even though my mind and judgment won't say that. People are going to have the opportunity for the experiences they need to evolve, no matter where they are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes that is war and killing and being killed and all that. But it's there if that's what they need to evolve.
Rock bottom.
Yeah, but that's
a lot of people don't start the work until they hit
It's a lot better to be here and work it through. But when you see that, then it changes the perspective that you put your life in.
Yes.
And you can hold your life as more to that. You know that exists, so you don't have to be so afraid of where you're going in. I mean, we have the paradox. We have a being, which is still a strange thing to say, that may be eternal, no beginning, no end. And yet we are in a body that has a need to begin and end.
Begin and end.
And there's a paradox in that. But now we tie into this body like that's who we are. But that's our piece to experience this environment.
It's our vehicle. We are not this body. We
Otherwise,
are
if you don't have one of these, you don't get to play.
And we all want to play.
Yeah. So we have this to play down here, to grow, to have these opportunities to experience. But letting go of that doesn't mean we have to let go that the being disappears, because the being is energy.
But that's what we're afraid of.
Energy never disappears. It just
can't be created or destroyed.
Correct. So it's going to go on. It's going to go on. And can we be more connected to all the other parts of it? I mean, it's all energy.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
It's crazy. Well, before I ask you the last question, I'd like to ask you, where can people find you? You have your website, and then there's people who might need work from you or your students, and there's people who might want to study, right? Study stuff.
Okay. All of that's available on the website for contact,
Yep.
structuralenergetictherapy.com. So that's available there, and they can always
Okay.
call. They can call
Okay.
basically the number that's on the website if they have other questions they want to ask me individually. Sometimes it's supposed to work is to find a therapist around the country.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a therapist in your area or not, but it's like even just calling and picking up and checking that out is the beginning of a journey. Your mind, you made
Yeah.
a
Taking
step.
that first step. Yep.
And the funny thing about journeys is no journey is complete till every step's taken. And sometimes people
Mm.
think it has to be that jump across the canyon, or like Carlos
Right.
Costado had of jumping into
All
the
in one
canyon with
go.
the things. But the reality is, it's the step not taken that stops you, however
Yeah.
big or small it is.
Yeah.
So if you have an interest, take a step,
Mm.
one step further, and see what's on the other side of that step not taken.
I like that.
And that opens up the possibility for you to look at other things.
Well, I'm grateful to be one of those people who gets to see you because my body needs it. You've changed my life for sure.
Well, it's been an honor to do that.
So last question here. Top human stands for triple optimized human, the triple being mind, body, spirit.
Mhm.
We've kind of touched on it in ways, but maybe we can kind of boil it down. How would you, or what does being triple optimized, being optimizing your mind, body, and spirit, all of them together, what does that mean to you?
Well, that means a state of self-actualization. You come together not just with one or the other, but with all the potentials opening up for you to go ahead and expand. And I think that's basically what we're on the planet to do, all of
Yes.
that, because if you just do one part, it leaves other stuff undone. And doing the more of all of it to integrate, I find in rigid structures, when you can change two of the three, you get a big change.
Mm.
The third one can't stand by itself, but if it can really actively work on all three, you're optimizing the ability to expand and self-actualize. And you're looking
Yeah.
at life from a different standpoint of survival, or just making some money, or just being a success, whatever these little things that society tells us are successful. I'll be a success when I make $1 million, or I write this program, or I whatever, to I'll be a success when I become everything I can be.
Yeah.
That's something different.
Yeah.
And
And you
so,
can be that and keep expanding for more.
yeah, and as you
Right.
focus that way, all the other things tend to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to concentrate on making a lot of money because there's enough money there. You don't have to concentrate on finding enough air because there's definitely enough air there to give you that energy. You don't have to concentrate on finding people that will help you grow because they're there. It's all
Right.
there for you, for your
Yeah.
relationship, for whatever you're doing. So it's really great. Then you can start opening up and looking at little aspects that'll show up, whether it's a relationship with a certain person or this or that. It just fills in and fills in and fills in. So this great big sphere of what's possible starts to become complete and rolls on through its majesty of going and growing.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to try as hard for all the things that you want.
No, there's a momentum that works you, and
Yeah.
you don't fall into the traps the way you would have, where the mind would have grabbed on, I have to protect myself, or I have to survive, or I have to do this or that.
Right. But they will, you still have to take the opportunity.
You have to
You,
take
you
the
still have to
opportunity.
play your part. Right.
If you don't do your
Yeah.
part, then you start getting smaller again. You have that choice any
Mm.
given moment to go for the larger or go for the smaller.
Yeah.
And it's not all bad if you see yourself going smaller, because that awareness is the first thing that allows you to change. So don't beat
Yes.
yourself up. You say, oh, is this where I want to go, or do I want to take that other step? Oh, I'll meditate tonight. It's easier to meditate tonight. It's actually easier to go in the way of expansion once you reach a certain
Yes.
point. It's self-generating. And when you go the other way, it's like you have to almost compress yourself to shorten it down.
Yeah. I like that. Well, thank you so much, Don, for coming on the
Oh, you're
podcast today.
welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. This has been great. And I believe I'll see you in a couple days
Okay,
for
great.
our next session. Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
I've enjoyed this. Thanks. And I hope some people will listen to it and at least see a different perspective on something.
Yeah.
If nothing else, just get that idea. There's some different perspectives out here on what life's about.